She was 21 years old. Homeless. No family, no savings, just $10 folded inside a backpack she'd been living out of for 3 months. And with that $10, she bought an abandoned ranger station. Deep in the mountains of Idaho, so far from civilization that the nearest paved road was 14 miles away, over a pass at 7,200 feet. The Forest Service said it was unsafe. The county said it had been condemned for decades. 3 people had tried to buy it before her. None of them lasted a week. But what nobody knew, what nobody could have known, was that locked inside that old ranger cabin, in a sealed metal cabinet that hadn't been opened in over 50 years, was something that would change her life forever. A letter from a man who died long before she was born. A Bible with a handwritten note from a mother to her son, and a small fortune in cash. Saved $1 at a time by a man who trusted the mountains to decide who would find it next. Her name was Briar Ashcroft. And this is the story of the loneliest girl in America, who walked 14 miles into the wilderness to be alone, and found something she never expected to find waiting for her: a family. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, please subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We love seeing how far these stories travel. The wind on the pass at 7,200 feet doesn't sound like wind in other places. In other places, wind has direction. It comes from somewhere, goes somewhere. You can lean into it. You can turn your back to it. Not here. Here the wind comes from all directions at once. It rises up from the valleys. It pours down from the granite peaks. It swirls around the rock cairns at the top of the pass like something alive, something that has been waiting. But to understand how a 21-year-old girl ended up standing on a mountain pass in central Idaho with everything she owned on her back and $10 left in the world, we have to go back. We have to go back to a small house on a quiet street in the suburbs outside Spokane, to a kitchen with yellow curtains, to a little girl sitting on a linoleum floor with a road atlas open in her lap. The girl was 8 years old. Her name was Briar, and her finger was tracing the green spaces on the map. Her mother stood at the kitchen counter, making meatloaf. Rosalind Ashcroft was 34 years old. She worked as a bookkeeper at a feed store. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. Her hair was the color of a fox in autumn, russet, streaked with the first early gray. She watched her daughter trace the green spaces. "What are you looking at, sweetheart? The places nobody owns." Rosalind put down the wooden spoon. She walked across the kitchen. She sat down on the floor next to her daughter, which was something other mothers in other suburbs didn't do. Sit on the kitchen floor, in the middle of cooking dinner, to look at a map with their child. But Rosalind Ashcroft was not other mothers. "That one's called a national forest," she said, pointing to a green patch in northern Idaho. "And that one's called a wilderness area. And that one's called BLM land. They all mean almost the same thing. Public, belongs to everyone, belongs to no one." Briar traced the boundary of the wilderness area with her finger. "I'm going to live there someday." Rosalind didn't laugh. Rosalind didn't say it was a phase. Rosalind didn't say be realistic. Rosalind said, "Then we better start packing." And she smiled, and she got up, and she went back to her meatloaf. That was the kind of mother Rosalind was. Briar's father had left when she was 4 years old. She didn't remember him, not really. She remembered the shape of a man in a doorway. She remembered the sound of a car door. She remembered her mother sitting on the edge of the bathtub with a tissue in her hand and the bathroom door not quite closed. She didn't remember anything else. And she didn't ask. Because, by the time she was old enough to ask, her mother had already made the answer clear without ever speaking it. We don't need him. We have each other. That's enough. And it was. For 17 years, it was enough. Rosalind worked at the feed store 6 days a week. She came home tired. She made dinner anyway. She read to Briar every night until Briar was 12. She drove her to trailheads on Saturdays. She bought her a topographic map every year for her birthday. She never asked Briar to be a different kind of girl than the kind she was. Briar started camping alone at 14. Most mothers would have said no. Rosalind said, "Take the whistle, take the bear spray, tell me when you'll be back. And if you say you'll be back Sunday at 6, I want you on this porch Sunday at 6. Are we clear?" "We're clear, Mom." "I love you, Briar. I love you, Mom." That was the whole conversation. By the time Briar was 17, she had hiked over 800 miles of trail in Washington and Idaho, mostly alone. Mostly off-trail. She knew how to read a topo map. She knew how to filter water. She knew how to start a fire in the rain. She knew how to be by herself, which is a skill. Whether anyone admits it or not, most people never learn it. Rosalind found the lump in November. She was 47 years old. She didn't tell Briar for a week. She wanted to be sure. She made an appointment. She drove herself to the clinic. She drove herself home. She made dinner. She sat across from Briar at the kitchen table. And she ate her green beans. And she watched her daughter eat. And she didn't say anything. Then on a Saturday morning, in the middle of December, while Briar was washing the breakfast dishes, Rosalind said, "Honey, I need to tell you something." Briar didn't turn around, because she already knew. She had known for a week. A mother doesn't go quiet like that without a reason. "Okay, Mom. It's pancreatic." "Okay, Mom." They said 6 weeks. The sponge was still in Briar's hand. She turned around. Her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, reading glasses on the beaded chain, hands folded on the placemat. The morning sun coming through the yellow curtains and turning her russet hair into something almost gold. She looked beautiful. She looked like a woman who had already decided not to be afraid. "Okay, Mom." That was all Briar could say. For an hour. Just, "Okay, Mom." 6 weeks turned out to be 5. The hospital was clean and white and quiet. Rosalind didn't want to die there, but the pain got too bad and there wasn't anything to do about it. The morphine drip ticked. The window looked out at a parking lot. The TV played a daytime game show with the sound off. Briar sat in the chair next to the bed, holding her mother's hand. Hour after hour, day after day, on the last day, Rosalind opened her eyes. She looked at Briar. She squeezed her hand. She said, "Listen to me, baby." "I'm listening." "Go. Mom. Go find your place. The one on the map. The one nobody owns." "Mom, I can't." "You can. You will. I lived my life. You go live yours." "I don't want to go without you." You won't be without me, Briar Ashcroft. Don't you understand that yet?" And Briar started crying. And Rosalind said one more thing. "The wind. Listen to the wind, baby. That's where I'll be." Then she closed her eyes, and she didn't open them again. The funeral was small. A handful of people from the feed store, a neighbor from across the street, Rosalind's older sister from Boise who Briar barely knew, a pastor who said nice things about a woman he had never met. That was it. That was the whole list of people who would mourn Rosalind Ashcroft. The ranch house was a rental. The car had been repossessed during the medical leave. The savings, what little there had ever been, had gone to co-pays and prescriptions and the funeral home. After the service, Briar walked back to the house alone. She walked through the empty rooms. She stood in her mother's bedroom. She opened the closet. The clothes were still on the hangers. The shoes were still lined up on the floor. She closed the closet. She walked to her own room. She took her backpack out from under the bed. She started packing, and 2 days later, she walked out of the house for the last time, with everything she owned on her back, $400 in her pocket. 21 years old, no family, nowhere to go, just the wind. The first year was apple picking in Wenatchee, working at a backpacker hostel in Seattle, trail crew with the Forest Service in the North Cascades. The trail crew was the best. Long days swinging a Pulaski axe, building water bars, sleeping in a tent 3 miles from the nearest road. $11 an hour. She would have done it for free. But seasonal work ends when the season ends. By the second winter, Briar was couch surfing, hostel bed rotating, bus station drifting. She was tired. She was so tired. The Seattle hostel was where she met Cordelia. Cordelia Banks was 68 years old. She was a retired school teacher from Pittsburgh. She had given herself a present on her 65th birthday. She had sold her house, bought an annuity, packed 2 suitcases, and started traveling. Hostels mostly, trains and buses. She had been to 41 states in 3 years. She was sitting in the common room of the hostel one rainy evening drinking a cup of tea, and she watched a young woman come in from the rain, soaked, tired, carrying a backpack that was clearly everything she owned in the world. The young woman sat down at the table across from her, and Cordelia Banks, who had taught 4th grade for 41 years. Who could read a child's face the way other women read recipes, looked at this 20-year-old girl and saw something. Loss. So much loss. "You look like you could use a cup of tea, sweetheart." Briar looked up. She didn't know what to say, because nobody had called her sweetheart in over a year. She started crying, right there in the hostel common room, in front of a stranger, with wet hair and wet shoes and a backpack at her feet. Cordelia got up. Cordelia walked around the table. Cordelia sat down next to her, and Cordelia put her arm around this girl she had never met, and she didn't say a word. She just held her, the way Rosalind would have held her. The way a mother holds a daughter who is too tired to keep being brave for a long time. Until Briar stopped crying. Then Cordelia said, "Tell me your name, sweetheart." "Briar." "Briar what?" "Ashcroft." "Briar Ashcroft. Now we're going to have a cup of tea, and you're going to tell me where you've been, and where you're going, and we're going to figure it out together." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Cordelia made her a cup of tea. Cordelia made her a sandwich. Cordelia got her a bed for the night and paid for it out of her own pocket and refused to take it back. And, before Cordelia left the hostel 2 days later to catch a train to Portland, she gave Briar a slip of paper with her address and phone number. "You write to me, you hear, you write to me, and tell me where you are, and how you're doing, and what you find. I want to know. Why? Because somebody should." That was the answer. Because somebody should. Briar wrote to Cordelia every month for the next 1.5 years, and Cordelia wrote back every single time. The library in Coeur d'Alene was where Briar found the listing. It was February. Slushy snow on the ground outside. The library was warm. The librarian was a woman in her 50s who let homeless kids use the computers without asking questions. Briar had no plan that morning. She had $4.23 in her pocket. She had a bus ticket good for one more ride. She had the address of a hostel in Boise where she thought she could probably get a bed for the week. She did not have a plan. She sat down at the computer. She opened a browser and, for reasons she could not have explained even afterward, she typed into the search bar, Forest Service, surplus property. She didn't know why, because maybe she had been thinking about her mother again, because maybe the wind was talking again, because maybe somewhere in the back of her brain, the 8-year-old girl with the road atlas had never gone away, had only been waiting for a moment exactly like this one. The first page of results was useless. Government auctions of trucks, office furniture, old radio equipment. The second page was better. Buildings, old ranger stations, fire lookouts, work camps. She scrolled. Most had been sold years ago. And then, there, District Ranger Station, Salmon Chalice National Forest, Central Idaho. Parcel reverted to county after original deed holder. Died without heirs. Building condemned but structurally intact according to most recent inspection in 1991. No utilities, no road access October through June. Foot trail access only over 7,200 foot pass. Asking price, $10. Briar stared at the screen. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She read it again. $10. She clicked on the photo. A small dark log cabin in a clearing. A green metal roof. A stone chimney. A leaning lookout tower behind it. Lodgepole pines around the edges of the clearing. It looked like the cabin her mother had been pouring tea in. In her dream, the dream Briar had not yet had, but she would, 3 nights from now, in a tent at the base of a mountain pass. She just didn't know it yet. She scrolled down to the contact information. A name. Marguerite Holloway, County Clerk's Office, Custer County, Idaho. A phone number. She got up from the computer. She walked to the payphone in the lobby. She put in her last 2 quarters. She dialed. The phone rang 4 times. A woman picked up. Custer County Clerk. I'm calling about the ranger station listing. A long pause. Which one, honey? The Salmon Chalice one. The one for $10. Another long pause. Hold on. A rustling of papers. Honey, are you sure? Sure of what? That cabin's been on the books for 18 years. I know. There's a reason. I know. You don't know. Briar pressed the receiver harder against her ear. Tell me the reason. Marguerite Holloway, 65 years old, Custer County Clerk for the last 28 years. The woman who had been answering this phone since before Briar Ashcroft was born took a breath on the other end of the line.
3 people have bought it in the last 30 years, sweetheart.
3. And none of them lasted a week up there. Why? I don't know why, I just know what I know. I want to buy it, honey. I want to buy it. You don't even know where it is. Yes, I do. You haven't seen it. I've seen pictures. In February. I'll wait until the pass clears. A pause. A long one. Honey, how old are you? 21. Where's your family? I don't have any. Marguerite Holloway closed her eyes. She had been doing this job for 28 years. And in those 28 years, she had heard every kind of voice on the other end of this phone. Tired voices, hopeful voices, voices that wanted something they could not name. This voice was different. This voice was not lonely. This voice was certain. There is a difference. And Marguerite Holloway, after 28 years, could hear it. What's your name, sweetheart? Briar Ashcroft. Briar, I'm not going to talk you out of this, but I want you to do one thing for me before you come. Okay. I want you to call somebody, anybody, and tell them where you're going and when you're going and when you'll be. I don't have anybody to call. You said your name was Briar Ashcroft. You said it like somebody taught you to say it. Whoever taught you to say your name like that is somebody. Call them. Briar stood in the lobby of the Coeur d'Alene Library with the payphone receiver pressed against her ear. And she thought about her mother. And she thought about the way her mother had taught her to introduce herself when she was 4 years old. Hand out. Eyes up. My name is Briar Ashcroft. Pleased to meet you. She started crying, quietly. Not enough for Marguerite Holloway to hear over the phone, but enough. Okay. You promise me. I promise. Then you come on out here, Briar Ashcroft, and we'll do the paperwork, and we'll see what the mountains have to say about you. That night, in the corner of the hostel common room, Briar wrote a letter to Cordelia Banks. Dear Cordelia, I'm going to do something that probably sounds crazy. I'm going to buy a cabin. It's in the mountains in Idaho. It's 14 miles from the nearest road. It costs $10. There's no electricity and no running water and no phone, and the pass that gets you there is closed 8 months of the year. I think it might be my place. The one Mom used to talk about. The one nobody owns. I'm scared. I'm scared because I don't know if I can do this. I'm scared because if I can't, I don't know what comes next. But I have to try. I love you. I'll write again when I get there. Briar. She mailed it the next morning. 3 days later, she walked into the hostel common room, and there was an envelope waiting for her at the front desk. Cordelia must have sat down and written back the moment she got the letter, and put it in the mail the same day. Inside the envelope was a folded note, and $200 in 20s, and a topographic map. The note said, Briar, the mountains have been waiting for you. I have been waiting for you. Take the money. Don't argue. Take the map. It's an old one. I bought it 40 years ago when I was planning a trip I never took. Maybe it was waiting for the right person. That's you, sweetheart. Be careful. Write to me. Cordelia. Briar unfolded the map. It was a USGS quadrangle. hand creased along the original folds, the paper soft with age. The colors faded, but readable. She looked at the title in the lower right corner. Salmon Chalice National Forest, Central Idaho. She looked at the date in the lower left corner, 1986. She looked at the section of the map that contained her cabin. There was a small, handwritten X, in pencil, right on the spot. Briar sat down on the floor of the hostel common room. She held the map in her lap. She traced the X with her finger, and she did not cry this time. She just smiled, because she had been right. The wind was talking. 2 weeks later, she was standing at a trailhead in central Idaho, 48 pounds of supplies on her back, a pair of borrowed snowshoes lashed to the outside of the pack. The Forest Service ranger who had checked her in was looking at her gear and her boots, and the easy way she shouldered the pack, and had decided she knew what she was doing. He was right. She made the road walk in one long day. 8 miles of switchbacks, lodgepole pines on both sides, 2 creeks crossed on simple log bridges, patches of late-season snow in the shaded sections, an old burn from a fire decades back, silver-gray dead trees standing above the fresh green of new growth coming up around their bases. She camped that night at the base of the pass, in a small flat clearing beside a frozen creek. She ate cheese and dried fruit for dinner, watched the stars come out one by one above the dark teeth of the granite ridge above her. It was cold, below freezing by midnight. She slept inside her thermal underwear, inside her sleeping bag, inside her tent, water bottle tucked next to her body so it wouldn't freeze. She slept hard, the deep, heavy sleep of someone whose body had been working all day. She dreamed. She dreamed of her mother. It was the first time she had dreamed of her mother since the funeral. In the dream, Rosalind was sitting at a kitchen table. The kitchen was in a small log cabin. There was a fire in the stone fireplace. The yellow light was warm and soft. Rosalind was pouring tea. She looked up when Briar walked in. She smiled. She said, "You're almost here, sweetheart." "I know, Mom. I have your cup ready." "I know, Mom. Come and sit down." "I will, Mom. I just have to get there first." "You will. You're so close." And the dream faded, and Briar woke up at dawn, with frost thick on the outside of her sleeping bag, and her breath making clouds in the cold air, and the eastern sky the color of pale rose behind the dark ridge above her. The second day, she climbed the trail to the pass. The trail was steep, switchbacking up a north-facing slope that still held patches of snow. She kicked steps. She used her trekking poles. She stopped twice to drink water. Halfway up, she heard footsteps coming down. She looked up. An older woman was descending the trail toward her. Tall, wiry, white hair pulled back into a braid, a worn canvas jacket, boots that had seen 1,000 miles, a bundle of dried wildflowers tied with twine and tucked into a side pocket of her day pack. The woman saw Briar. The woman stopped. The woman smiled. It was not the smile of a stranger. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting. "You must be the girl who bought the cabin." Briar stared. "How did you?" "Word travels in this country, sweetheart. Faster than people do. There's about 40 of us in the whole valley, and a stranger on the trail makes the rounds before sundown." My name is Imogene Lockhart. I live 9 miles east of the cabin you just bought. I'll be your nearest neighbor, more or less. Briar Ashcroft. "I know. How?" Marguerite called me from the county office, said there was a young woman coming up, said somebody might want to be on the trail. In case. In case what? Imogen Lockhart looked at her. The look went through Briar like a hand reaching into water. In case the cabin let you in, sweetheart. Or in case it didn't. What does that mean? That cabin chooses Briar. It always has. 3 people that tried to live there before you. None of them lasted, and I won't tell you why, because the reasons were their reasons and not the cabin's. You're scaring me. I'm not trying to. A pause. A long one. The wind moved through the pass above them, and Imogen Lockhart's white braid lifted slightly and settled. When you find the metal cabinet. What? When you find the metal cabinet, sweetheart. There's a metal cabinet in the corner of the main room. Don't open it the first day. Let the cabin settle first. Sit by the fireplace. Make a cup of tea. Sleep one night. Then open it. You hear me? How do you know about the cabinet? I knew the man who lived there. Who? His name was Alistair Caldwell. He was a district ranger. He served the station from 1958 until they closed it in 1971. And I knew him. How? Imogen smiled again, smaller this time. He was my cousin's sweetheart. Briar's knees almost gave out. She caught herself on her trekking poles. Your cousin? Distant, but yes. And he was a good man, and the cabin remembers him. And it has been waiting for somebody who will love it the way he did. So when you get up there, don't rush, don't grab, let it choose you. Are we clear? We're clear. Then go on, Briar Ashcroft. Go on up over the pass. I'll come visit you when you're settled, not before. How will you know? I'll know. And then Imogen Lockhart walked past her, down the switchback, toward the road, her dried wildflowers swaying gently in the side pocket of her pack, and Briar stood there, in the middle of the trail, with her heart pounding, with her hand shaking, with every single thing she thought she understood about this trip suddenly rearranging itself into a shape she did not recognize. The cabin chose. The cabin remembered. The cabin had been waiting. She turned and looked up at the pass above her. The wind was still blowing. She climbed. She reached the top of the pass at 1 in the afternoon. She stood there for a moment in the wind. She looked back at the way she had come. She looked forward at the way she was going, and she saw nothing but mountains in either direction. No roads, no buildings, no power lines, just the long ridge of granite. Just the dark green of the lodgepole pines below. Just the sky. She was alone. Completely alone. In a way that almost nobody in America is alone anymore. And she did not cry this time. She had cried enough. She crossed the pass. She descended the trail through a long valley of lodgepole pine and aspen. The aspens were just starting to leaf out. Their new leaves the brilliant pale green that aspens get in spring, like 1,000 small lanterns held up against the dark green of the conifers. The footing was dry. She made good time. By mid-afternoon she was walking through subalpine meadows where the snow had melted and the first wildflowers of the season were appearing. Glacier lilies, spring beauties, pasque flowers in their fuzzy purple-gray clusters. She arrived at the cabin just before sunset. It sat in a small clearing on a flat shelf of land above a creek, built of dark-stained logs, single-story, steep green metal roof, a small covered porch fronting the south side, a stone chimney rising from the west wall, 3 windows on the front, two on each side, a simple wooden door painted faded brown behind the cabin, partially visible through the trees. The lookout tower, about 60 feet tall, leaning slightly, but standing. Briar stood at the edge of the clearing. She did not walk forward, she just looked. The light was the color of late copper. The lodgepole pines stood tall and straight, their lower trunks bare for the first 20 feet. A cold breeze came down off the ridge. The tops of the trees moved slowly in unison, a long, slow wave that traveled the length of the clearing and disappeared into the forest beyond. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called. The sound carried impossibly far. This was the place. This was the place she had been looking at on maps for 13 years. She walked to the door. The porch boards creaked under her boots. She tried the door handle. Locked, but the lock was old, and the wood around it was soft. She put her shoulder against the door. She pushed. The latch gave with a small splintering sound. The door swung inward. She stepped inside, a single large room. Floor of rough-cut pine. Dark with age but solid. Walls of the same dark logs as the exterior. The chinking between them mostly intact. Ceiling open to the rafters with a loft area at one end accessible by a ladder. A stone fireplace dominating the west wall, its mantel rough-cut from a single piece of timber, furniture left behind. A heavy wooden table in the center of the room with 2 chairs. A simple cot frame against the back wall. A bookshelf along the east wall. Empty. A small writing desk under one of the front windows. A coat rack by the door with 3 iron hooks. Everything covered in dust. Everything exactly as it had been when the last ranger walked out in 1971. And there, in the corner, beside the bookshelf, a metal cabinet. Gray steel, 4 feet tall. 2 doors with a built-in lock. Government property stamped with a faded inventory number. The lock was rusted, but intact. The doors were closed. Briar stared at the cabinet. Imogene Lockhart's voice came back to her. Don't open it the first day. Let the cabin settle first. Sit by the fireplace. Make a cup of tea. Sleep one night. Then open it. She turned away from the cabinet. She set her pack down by the door. She walked to the fireplace. She knelt on the cold stone hearth. She did not light a fire that night. Not yet. She wanted the first night to be exactly the way Alistair Caldwell might have spent his first night in 1958. Before he made the cabin his own, she unrolled her sleeping bag on the dusty pine floor. She ate a cold dinner of cheese and dried fruit. She lay down in the dark, and she listened. The wind moved through the lodgepole pines outside. The cabin creaked softly. Somewhere up in the rafters a deer mouse rustled, and was still. She closed her eyes, and just before she fell asleep, she thought she heard her mother's voice, very faint, almost not there. You made it, baby. You made it home. Briar Ashcroft slept. For the first time in 2 years and 3 months. She slept in a place that was hers. She woke at dawn. The first thing she saw was a beam of sunlight coming through the eastern window, falling directly on the metal cabinet in the corner. She sat up. The dust in the sunbeam swirled slowly. The cabin was quiet. The cabin was watching. She got up. She put on her boots. She walked to the cabinet. She remembered Imogene's instruction. Let the cabin settle first. Sit by the fireplace. Make a cup of tea. She wasn't going to do any of that, because she had waited her whole life, and 1 more hour was more than she could bear. She looked around the room. There, hanging from a nail above the door, a small metal ring with 3 keys on it. She took it down. The 3rd key, the smallest one, the one for a filing cabinet. She walked back to the cabinet. She put the key in the lock. She turned. It clicked. She opened the doors. Maps. Hundreds of maps. Folded and stacked, organized by region. Topographic, fire boundary, trail, hand-drawn route maps. The labels in pencil on the covers. The handwriting careful and small. Some of them were the kind of maps that collectors paid serious money for. She knew that immediately, but it wasn't the maps that made her stop breathing. On the bottom shelf, stacked neatly behind the maze, were canvas bags, 3 of them, each tied with twine. She lifted one. It was heavy. She set it on the floor. She untied the knot. Old paper money, 20s, 50s, bound in stacks with paper bands. The bands labeled with years: 1962, 1963, 1964, 1965. She opened the second bag. More money, more years. 1966 through 1968. She opened the third bag. 1969 through 1971. And then behind the bags, a leather portfolio. She lifted it out. She set it on the table. She opened it. A single typed letter on Forest Service letterhead, dated June 1971. And underneath the letter, a book. She lifted it. A small leather-bound Bible. Old, the cover soft with use. She opened it. On the inside cover, in a careful feminine handwriting, in ink that had faded to brown, "For Alistair from your mother. Don't forget to pray for the one who comes after you." Briar sat down on the floor of the cabin, the Bible in her hands. The sunbeam falling on the maps, the wind outside moving through the lodgepole pines. She had not opened the letter yet. She had not counted the money yet. She had not read a single word of what Alistair Caldwell had left for her. But she already knew. Whoever he was, whoever he had not been alone. He had been someone's son, and someone's mother had loved him enough to give him a Bible, and he had loved her enough to keep it. And keep it, and keep it, until he closed it inside a metal cabinet in the corner of a cabin in the mountains of Idaho, for a girl he would never meet, to find. 55 years later, Briar Ashcroft pressed the Bible against her chest, and she finally let herself cry. Not for her mother, not this time, for Alistair Caldwell, a man she had never known, a man who had thought of her before she existed. The letter was 3 pages long, typed on a manual typewriter, the kind that pressed the ink into the paper hard enough that you could read it with your eyes closed, the kind that made the E's a little crooked when the typist was tired. Briar read the letter sitting on the floor of the cabin, with the Bible in her lap, with the morning sun moving across the pine boards. She read it 3 times. The first time, just to know what it said. The second time, to make sure she had read it right. The third time, slowly, word by word, letting each sentence land. To the next person who finds this cabin. My name is Alistair Caldwell. I have served as the district ranger of this station since 1958, when I was 27 years old. For 13 years, this cabin has been my home, and these mountains have been my responsibility. I have kept the trails maintained, the fire roads cleared, the lookout tower in working order. I have buried the dead from 3 search and rescue operations, and helped birth 1 child whose mother miscalculated her trip. I have loved this country with the kind of love that does not require explanation." Briar stopped at that line. She read it again. The kind of love that does not require explanation. She had loved her mother that way. She had not been able to explain it. Not at the funeral, not to the pastor, not to the neighbor across the street, not to her aunt from Boise, not to anyone. How do you explain the love of a daughter for the only person in the world who ever sat down on the kitchen floor next to her without being asked? You don't. You don't explain it. You just carry it. She kept reading. The Forest Service is closing this station next month as part of a consolidation. They have offered me a desk job in Salmon. I have declined. I am moving to Alaska to take a position on the Tongass. I will not be coming back. Over the years, I have saved a portion of my paycheck in cash every month and stored it in this cabinet with the maps. I never spent much. The cabin was free. The food was mostly what I caught or grew. The only thing I bought regularly was coffee. The money has accumulated. I am leaving it here. I am not leaving it for the Forest Service. They have decided this place is no longer worth their attention. And I did agree, and I will not reward that decision by giving them my savings. I am leaving it for whoever finds this cabin next. Briar held the page in both hands. Her hands were shaking. She kept reading. If the Forest Service sells it, it will go to whoever buys it. If a hiker breaks in and finds it, it will go to that hiker. If the cabin sits empty for 100 years and then a wildfire burns it down, the money will burn with the building, and that is also acceptable to me. What I want is for the money to belong to someone who values this place. Anyone who walks 14 miles to get here, and who opens a Forest Service cabinet with the key I left hanging by the door, has earned the right to whatever I have left behind. I will not be the person to decide who that is. I will trust the mountains to decide, the way I have trusted them for 13 years. Briar lowered the letter. She looked around the cabin, the dust in the sunbeam, the empty bookshelf, the cold fireplace, the doorway to the loft. The mountains had decided. The mountains had decided to send her. Take care of the cabin if you can. The roof is good for another 20 years if you keep the snow off it. The chimney needs repointing. The lookout tower is structurally sound, but the cab needs new windows. Don't climb it in high wind. The west window of the cabin sticks in damp weather. There's a spring 200 feet north behind a large boulder shaped like a turtle. This place taught me everything I know about being alive. I hope it teaches you too. Alistair Caldwell, June 30th, 1971. Briar folded the letter, slowly, along the original creases. She placed it back in the leather portfolio. She stood up. She walked outside. She stood on the porch in the morning sun. She said out loud, to no one and everyone, "I'm going to take care of it." The voice that came out of her was not her own voice. It was steadier. It was older. It was the voice of someone who had just been given a job and had said yes. 2 days later, Briar walked behind the cabin. She walked through the trees. She walked north. She walked exactly 200 feet. And there it was. A large boulder, shaped like a turtle, the head pointing west. The shell, humped and rounded, a crack in the granite where the back legs would have been. Behind the boulder, a small, clear pool. Spring water bubbling up from the ground. Cold. So cold it made her teeth hurt when she scooped a handful into her mouth. It tasted faintly of stone. It tasted like the best water she had ever had. She stood there for a long time. She thought about a man she had never met. She thought about a man who had walked these 200 feet thousands of times. To get water, to wash his face, to sit on this very boulder, maybe, and watch the trees move in the wind. She put her hand on the turtle's back. The granite was warm from the sun. "Hello, Alistair." The wind moved through the lodgepoles. She walked back to the cabin. She had work to do. The cabin had not been lived in for 55 years. It needed everything. But Briar Ashcroft was 21 years old. She had hiked 800 miles by the age of 17. She had worked a full season of trail crew with the Forest Service. She had survived 2 years of being homeless without ever once asking anyone for anything she could not earn. She knew how to work, so she worked. She scrubbed the floors with creek water and a bristle brush she had carried in. Section by section, on her hands and knees. The dirty water came off in dark waves. Underneath, pine boards the color of honey, soft to the touch, worn smooth by 50 years of one man's boots. She washed the windows. She wiped down the bookshelf. She cleaned the stone hearth. She scraped 50 years of creosote out of the chimney from the bottom up. With a wire brush on a long pole, she inspected the wood cookstove. Cast iron. Surface rusted, but the firebox intact. She cleaned out the ash. She oiled the hinges. She tested the damper. It worked. She found the woodshed behind the cabin, half collapsed, still containing several cords of properly seasoned firewood. Lodgepole pine, cut and stacked over 50 years ago by a man named Alistair Caldwell, dry as bone, ready to burn. She lit the first fire on her 5th night. She had been waiting. She wanted to be ready. She built the fire small, the way her mother had taught her. Tinder, kindling, one small split log. Light it. Watch it catch. The smoke went up the chimney. The flame climbed the log. The cabin began to smell like wood smoke. For the first time in 55 years. Briar sat on the floor in front of the fire. She wrapped her arms around her knees. And she watched the flames. And she thought. Alistair Caldwell had sat in this exact spot. Probably looking at the same fireplace. Probably thinking about whatever a 27-year-old district ranger thinks about on his first cold night alone in a cabin in the mountains. She wondered what he had thought about. She wondered if he had been afraid. She wondered if anyone had ever loved him the way her mother had loved her. Some questions you can ask the wind. The wind doesn't always answer, but sometimes it does. A week into her cabin life, Briar took the Bible down from the mantel where she had been keeping it. She had not opened it again since the first morning. She had been waiting. She did not know what she was waiting for, but now she opened it. She turned past the inscription on the inside cover. She turned to the front matter, and inside the front cover, tucked behind the title page, a folded sheet of paper. She unfolded it. A list of names, written in careful handwriting, dated entries, spanning 13 years. The list said, "People I have helped this year." Underneath, names, January 1959. Helped a hiker named Owen Pritchard reach Stanley after he broke his ankle on the South Ridge. April 1961. Brought groceries to the Witzel family at the homestead for 3 weeks during the husband's recovery from pneumonia. July 1962. Helped Marion Wexley repair her truck on the Forest Road. Towed her in with my truck. Refused payment. October 1964. 11 miles in a blizzard with antibiotics for Joseph Aldridge. Suspected pneumonia. He lived. Breyer stopped at that line. She read it again. October 1964. 11 miles in a blizzard with antibiotics for Joseph Aldridge. Suspected pneumonia. He lived. She thought of Stanley, the little town an hour from the trailhead. The diner. The woman who had given her a free chocolate milkshake the first time she came in with her supply pack. What was her name? Phyllis. Phyllis something. Breyer turned the page. She kept reading. The list went on for 13 years. Names, dates, small acts, sometimes a sentence, sometimes just 2 or 3 words. May 1965. Carried wild flowers to Mrs. Beauchamp after the loss of her son. August 1967. Helped a young woman through a difficult labor in the back of a stalled vehicle on the forest road. Mother and child survived. Named the boy Caldwell. December 1969. Walked 3 miles in the dark to bring a Christmas tree to the Holloway children. Their father had passed in October. Breyer closed the Bible. She held it against her chest. Then she walked outside, onto the porch. She looked at the lookout tower behind the cabin. She climbed it for the first time. The ladder was steep. She went slowly. She held the rails tight. The cab at the top was small. Just a square room with windows on all 4 sides. Glass dirty but intact. A wooden chair, a small desk, an old metal device on the desk she didn't recognize at first. Then she did. A fire finder, a circular map with a sighting alidad in the center, so that when you saw smoke in any direction, you could measure exactly where it was. She turned around in the cab. She looked out, in every direction. Mountains, forests, rivers, meadows, 80 miles of wilderness, no roads, no buildings, no power lines, just the world. She stood there for almost an hour. She did not move. Then she started crying. Not because she was sad, because she had spent her entire life looking at maps and dreaming of standing exactly where she was now standing. And she had not believed, until she got there, that the dream could actually be real. The world had not given her many things in 21 years, but it had given her this, and this was enough, and it was more than enough. She came down from the tower as the sun was setting. She made a fire in the stove. She made beans and rice for dinner. She ate at the heavy wooden table that Alistair Caldwell had eaten at for 13 years. She washed her single dish. She brushed her teeth at the spring. She climbed up to the loft and laid out her sleeping bag on the wooden platform. And, before she lay down, she walked to the bookshelf. She placed the Bible on the top shelf, where Alistair Caldwell had probably kept it. She said, out loud, quietly, "I'll figure out the rest, Alistair. Just give me time." The cabin creaked softly. The wind moved through the lodgepole pines. A deer mouse rustled somewhere up in the rafters. She climbed into her sleeping bag. She slept. The supply run was every 2 weeks, 14 miles down, 14 miles back. It took her 2 days each direction in the beginning, then a day and a half, then one long day. By July, she could leave the cabin at 5 in the morning, make Stanley by mid-afternoon, do her shopping, eat at the diner, spend the night in the loaner cot Phyllis kept in the back room of the diner for travelers. Catch a few hours of sleep, start back at dawn, be home by sundown. It was the kind of routine that built a body. It was also the kind of routine that built a life. The diner was called the Sawtooth Cafe. It sat on the main street of Stanley. There was one main street. There were 3 buildings on it. The diner was one. Inside, 6 tables, a counter with 4 stools, a coffee pot that was always on, a pie case that always had at least 3 pies in it, a jukebox that played country songs from before Briar was born, bottle of ketchup at every table, salt and pepper shakers shaped like little white birds. Phyllis Aldridge ran the place by herself. She was 68 years old. She had run the diner for 31 years. She had short gray hair she cut herself. She wore an apron with a state of Idaho embroidered on the pocket. She moved fast for a woman her age. She remembered every face that had ever walked through her door. She had taken one look at Briar on her first visit. A young woman with a 40-pound pack and dust in her hair, and the kind of tired in her eyes that does not come from one bad night. Phyllis had said, "Sit down, honey. You look like you need a cheeseburger." "I have $11. That wasn't the question. What was the question? The question was whether you wanted a cheeseburger. "I do." "Then sit down." And Phyllis had made her a cheeseburger, and fries, and a chocolate milkshake, and had set them in front of her, and had refused to take her money. "You can pay me next time. Next time, you'll be back." "How do you know?" "Because there's nowhere else to go, honey. And because I know your face." "You don't know my face." "I know enough of your face." Briar had eaten the cheeseburger. She had cried into the milkshake. She had pretended she wasn't crying. Phyllis had pretended she didn't see. That was the first visit. By the 4th visit, Phyllis was making the cheeseburger before Briar sat down. And the 3rd week, Phyllis was setting aside the local paper for her, the Stanley Pioneer, a 4-page weekly that came out on Wednesdays. Phyllis had a stack of back issues waiting under the counter every time Briar walked in. By the 2nd month, Phyllis had taken to making Briar a hot dinner before she left to head back up the mountain. Always something with protein. Always something with potatoes. "You burn calories on that walk. You can't be living on rice and beans, honey." "I can. I have been." "Now you don't have to. Sit down. Eat the meatloaf." "Phyllis, you don't have to." "I don't have to do anything, honey. I want to. Sit down." It was on Briar's 7th or 8th visit, late June, that she finally asked. She had finished her dinner. Phyllis was wiping down the counter. The diner was empty except for them. The light through the front window was golden. Briar said, "Phyllis." "Yes, honey. Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "There was a man who used to be a ranger up where I live. His name was Alistair Caldwell. Did you ever know him?" Phyllis stopped wiping the counter. The rag froze in her hand. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she put the rag down. She walked around the counter. She sat down across from Briar in the booth. She put her hands flat on the table. She looked at Briar, and her eyes filled up with water. "Why are you asking me that?" "His name was in his Bible." "What?" "His Bible. He kept a list of people he helped. One of the names was Joseph Aldridge. Pneumonia. 1964. Phyllis closed her eyes. She kept them closed for a long time. When she opened them, the tears that had been waiting fell. 2 of them, one down each cheek. "That was my father. I know. I was 6 years old. I know."
I remember it. I remember every minute of it. We thought he was going to die.
The road was closed. The phone was down. My mother sat by his bed for 2 days and didn't sleep. And then there was a knock on the door. And it was him, a man we had never met, with antibiotics, from the clinic in Salmon, 11 miles through a blizzard, on foot, because his truck had broken down halfway. "He saved your father. He saved my father." Phyllis was crying now, not loud, just steady, the way a person cries when they have been holding something for 60 years. "I have wondered about him my whole life. We never saw him again after that. He never came back to collect, never asked for anything, never even let my mother thank him properly. Just gave her the antibiotics, told her the dosing, walked back into the storm. We didn't even know if he made it home. He made it home. How do you know?" "Because he wrote about it in 1965 in his journal. He said he barely made it. He said his right hand was frostbitten for a month afterward. He said he didn't care. He didn't care. He didn't care." Phyllis put her hands over her face. She cried. Briar reached across the table. She put her hand on Phyllis's hand. She didn't say anything. What was there to say? A 6-year-old girl had watched her father almost die in 1964, and a man she did not know had walked 11 miles in a blizzard to save him, and had walked back, and had never been thanked, and had carried that small heroism in his pocket for 62 years. And the girl had grown up, and had run a diner, and had wondered about him her whole life. And now, a 21-year-old girl had walked into her diner, carrying his Bible, with his list of names, and one of the names was her father, and one of the names had brought him home to her. When Phyllis finally lowered her hands, she looked at Briar. She said, "You eat in this diner for free, for the rest of your life. Do you hear me, honey? Phyllis, for the rest of your life. Phyllis, I can't. You can, and you will. That man saved my father, and his cabin chose you, and as long as I'm alive in this town, you are welcome at this table, always, forever. Now eat your pie." Briar ate her pie. She did not argue. There are some kinds of love you don't argue with. The mountain itself begins to teach you that. After a while. July became August. August became September. The aspens in the meadow below the cabin started to turn. The first night fell to 28 degrees. Briar split firewood every morning for an hour. She stacked it under the eaves. She started preparing for winter. She sold 6 maps through a dealer in Boise. She had carried them down on her supply runs, wrapped in waxed paper, tucked in her pack. The dealer had nearly fallen out of his chair when he saw them. Original USGS surveys, hand-corrected fire response maps, route maps from the 1940s, $11,000 wire transferred to a savings account she had opened with the help of a kind woman at the bank in Stanley. She did not feel rich. She felt like she was holding money that belonged to someone else, which she was. It belonged to Alistair. She had decisions to make about it, but not yet. For now, she kept the cabin. For now, she kept the lights on, which was a metaphor, because there were no lights, just candles, and one small kerosene lantern she had carried up from Stanley. For now, she read the journal she had found behind the bookshelf. The journal was where she learned the rest. The journal had been wedged behind the bookshelf, behind the last book on the bottom shelf. She had pulled the shelf out to clean behind it, and the journal had fallen out. Leather cover, hand-stitched. She had opened it, and had not been able to put it down for a week. The journal began in 1957. when Alistair Caldwell was 26 years old, living in Boise, working at a hardware store, engaged to a young woman named Cecily Truelove. Cecily Truelove, 24, a nurse, hair the color of wheat in July. She wore yellow dresses. She made him laugh at things that were not funny. She kept a small garden of tomatoes on the windowsill of her apartment. She was going to marry him in November. She died in September. A drunk driver crossed the center line on a county road outside Caldwell, Idaho. Cecily had been driving home from a night shift at the hospital. The journal said, October 14th, 1957. I went to identify her. They had cleaned her up, but I could see what they had cleaned. Her face was still hers. Mostly. The wedding ring was still on her finger. They had not been able to get it off, and they did not try. I asked for it. They gave it to me. I am wearing it now, on a chain around my neck. I do not know how to be alive. I do not know how to keep being alive. I do not know what alive even means anymore. If I die, please bury me near her.
But I do not think I will die. I think I will live for a long time, and I do not know why.
Briar read that entry and had to put the journal down. She walked outside. She stood on the porch. She breathed. She had thought she knew what loss felt like. She did know what loss felt like. But this was a different kind of loss. This was a man who had lost the future and had been left holding the present, like a stone too heavy to carry. She picked the journal back up. She kept reading. A few months later, Alistair had seen an advertisement in the Boise newspaper. The Forest Service was hiring district rangers. Seasonal positions could become permanent. Remote postings preferred. He had applied the next day. He had been accepted in March of 1958. He had walked into the cabin for the first time. In April of 1958, a few weeks after the snow melted enough to get the pack mules over the pass, the journal entry from that first night read, April 14th, 1958.
I do not know how to live alone, in a cabin in the woods. I have never done this. I have lit one fire in my life. I have never split firewood. I have never killed an animal. I have never been more than 100 miles from a city, but I have arrived, and the woman at the trailhead, the one who walked me in, said something to me as she left. She said, "The mountain does not ask where you came from. The mountain only asks if you are going to stay. I am going to stay. I do not know for how long, but I am going to stay." Briar read that line 3 times. The mountain does not ask where you came from. The mountain only asks if you are going to stay. She thought about her own first night. She thought about how she had not lit a fire. She thought about how she had been afraid she did not deserve to be here. She had been wrong. The mountain had not been asking her to deserve. The mountain had only been asking her to stay. Imogene Lockhart kept her promise. She came to visit, but not until August, 3 full months after Briar moved in. Briar had been wondering when she would come. She had stopped expecting her after the first month. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, Briar was sitting on the porch reading, and she looked up, and there at the edge of the clearing, Imogene, the same white braid, the same canvas jacket, the same boots, and in her arms, a bundle. Imogene crossed the clearing. She climbed the porch steps. She set the bundle down on the porch table. She looked at Briar. She nodded. "You stayed." "I stayed." "Good." "Why did you wait so long?" "Because I needed to know." "Know what?" "Whether you would still be here in August." "I'm here. I can see that." A pause.
Imogene sat down in the other chair on the porch. She unwrapped the bundle. Inside, a small wooden box. Old, the kind of box a man builds when he is taking his time. She slid the box across the table toward Briar. These were his. Whose? Alistair's. Their letters. He wrote them to his mother. From 1958 until she died in 1985. She kept every one of them. When she died, they came to me. I have read them many times, but they are not mine. They were never mine. You're giving them to me. I am. Why? Because they belong to whoever lives here, sweetheart. And you live here. Briar looked at the box. She did not open it. Not yet. Imogene watched her. After a moment, Imogene said, "There's one letter. You should read tonight." Which one? The one on top, from 1963. He was 32 years old. He had been here 5 years, and he wrote his mother something I want you to see. What? Read it, then we'll talk. Imogene stood up. She picked up her empty canvas jacket from the back of the chair. She walked down the porch steps. She turned around at the edge of the clearing. She said, "I'll come back in a week, Briar Ashcroft. Make a list of questions. There won't be time for all of them." Then she was gone. Briar sat on the porch with the box in front of her. The wind moved through the lodge poles. She lifted the lid. Inside, letters, yellowed envelopes bound with cotton string, each one addressed in Alistair's careful handwriting. Mrs. Constance Caldwell, a street address in Boise. She pulled the top letter from the stack. The envelope was dated October 1963. She opened it. Inside, one page, both sides filled, she read, "Dear Mother, the autumn here is harder than the spring. I have decided this. Autumn makes me think about Cecily. Spring does not. I don't know why. There was an early frost last night. I covered the kitchen herbs with a tarp, but I lost the basil anyway. I should have brought it inside. Mother, I want to tell you something. Sometimes when I am up at the lookout tower, or sitting on the porch in the evening, I think about who will come here after me. I do not believe I will live forever. None of us do. And the Forest Service has been talking about consolidating the district. They may close this station within the next 10 years. They have not said when. When they do, the cabin will sit empty. For how long, I don't know. But someday, someone will come.
I think about that person sometimes. I imagine that it is a young person. I don't know why. Maybe a young man, maybe a young woman. Someone who has lost something, who is looking for something they cannot name. I imagine they will walk up over the pass, the way I did, carrying everything they own. They will be tired, they will be alone, and the cabin will be waiting.
I have been thinking about how to leave them something. Some sign that they were not the first. That they are not alone. That somebody loved this place before them. Loved it enough to leave them everything they had. I am saving money. A little every month. I will leave it here when I go. Maybe a young woman. I keep thinking. A young woman with nowhere to go. I do not know why I keep thinking it will be her, but I do, if she comes. Mother, I want her to know. I thought about her. Before she existed, I thought about her, and I hoped she would come. Your loving son, Alistair. Briar put the letter down on the porch table. She did not move for a long time. The light went red across the meadow. The wind moved through the lodge poles. A raven called somewhere far away. She put her hand over her mouth. She closed her eyes. The early storm came the second week of October, 2 months early. The radio Briar had bought in Stanley said it was unseasonable. They were calling it a freak system. The weatherman in Boise sounded surprised. Briar had not been ready. She had wood, but not enough. The cabin had been costing her 2 armloads a day in the cold snaps. A real winter would cost her 6. She had 3 weeks' worth in the woodshed. Maybe 4. Not enough for a storm that came in October and might not let up. The snow started at 4 in the afternoon. By 6, there were 4 inches on the ground. By midnight, there were 16. By morning, the drifts against the cabin were waist-high. The temperature on the porch thermometer read 8 degrees. The wind was screaming over the ridge. Briar got out of bed. She built a fire in the cook stove. She built a fire in the fireplace. She put on every layer she owned. She kept the fires going all day. The cabin was warm, sort of. The corners were cold. The loft was cold. Her breath was visible if she walked more than 10 feet from the fireplace. By the 3rd day, her wood was running out. She had been pulling from the inside stack, the covered stack, the one inside the cabin in the small room off the kitchen. She had been saving the outside stacks for later. The outside stacks were now buried under 5 feet of snow. By the 4th day, the temperature was 3 degrees. She was burning faster than she thought. By the 5th day, the radio said another 2 feet was coming. Briar sat in front of the fireplace. She was wearing her sleeping bag like a coat. Her teeth were chattering. Her hands were stiff, she thought. I made a mistake. I should have stocked more wood. I should have called the ranger station. I should have. I should have. I should have. She closed her eyes. She thought of her mother. She thought of her mother on the kitchen floor with the road atlas. She thought of her mother saying, "Then we better start packing." She thought, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I tried." She started to drift. The drifting was not sleep. It was the body going quiet. The slow, gentle pull of hypothermia. Not death, but the road that led to it, and somewhere in the very back of Briar's drifting brain. She heard her mother's voice, not faintly this time, clearly. "Get up, baby. Get up. The wind is changing. Someone's coming. Get up." Briar tried to open her eyes. She couldn't. "Get up, baby. Please. Get up." She forced her eyes open. The fire was almost out. There was a banging, loud. Through the wall, a pounding. Someone was pounding on the cabin door. Someone was shouting her name. "Briar Ashcroft, open this door." A woman's voice. Imogene Lockhart's voice. "Open this door, child. Open it now." Briar dragged herself across the floor. She reached the door. She pulled herself up by the handle. She opened it. The cold hit her face. Imogene stood on the porch. White braid under a wool hat, canvas jacket, snowshoes. Behind her, pulling a wooden sled loaded with firewood, loaded with food, loaded with kerosene, loaded with blankets. A man, 45 years old, heavy beard, dark eyes, built like a tree. Imogene's nephew, Wendell Lockhart. He looked at Briar. His eyes went soft. He said one word, "Inside." And he and Imogene came through the door, and they did not stop moving for the next 2 hours. They built up the fires, they piled wood, they brewed broth, they wrapped Briar in 3 blankets, they sat with her on the floor in front of the fireplace. And they did not leave. When Briar could finally speak. Several hours later, with heat finally back in her hands, she looked at Imogen. She said, "How did you know?" Imogene smiled. "I told you, sweetheart." "You told me what?" "I told you I would know." She put her hand on Briar's hair. She smoothed it back from her face, the way Rosalind used to. You're not alone, Briar. You were never alone. You just hadn't met us yet. The storm lasted 3 more days. During those 3 days, Imogene Lockhart did not leave the cabin. Wendell stayed 2 nights. Then on the 3rd morning, when the snow let up just enough, he strapped his snowshoes back on. He kissed his aunt on the forehead. He looked at Briar. He said, "I'll be back in a week with more wood." Wendell. What? Thank you. He smiled, just a little, through the heavy beard. Your family now, Briar Ashcroft. You don't thank family. And he walked out into the snow, and Imogene stayed. Imogene was 75 years old. She did not stay because she had to. She stayed because she wanted to. She had brought her own sleeping bag. She had brought her own pillow. She had brought a small leather case with her reading glasses and a paperback novel and a tin of loose tea. She sat up on the cot Briar had not yet claimed for herself. She unpacked her things. She made tea. She handed Briar a cup. She sat down in the chair across from the fireplace. She said, "We have time now." "For what?" "For me to tell you the rest." Briar held her tea in both hands. The cup was warm. The fire was warm. The cabin smelled like wood smoke and pine, and the lavender Imogen had tucked into her sleeping bag stuff sack. The rest of what? The rest of the story, sweetheart. The rest of Alistair. Imogen took a sip of her tea. She looked at Briar over the rim of the cup. She said, "He didn't go to Alaska." Briar went still. What? He went. For a little while. He took the job in the Tongass. He stayed for 5 years. He was very far north, way up the Panhandle. He worked on a different ranger station up there. He was good at his job. They liked him. And then he came back. Back here. To Idaho. Not to this cabin, never to this cabin. He went to Salmon. He took a different name. He worked as a carpenter. He built houses for 30 years. He lived in a small place on the edge of town. A different name. Yes. Why? Imogen set her tea down. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at the fire. Because he didn't want to be found. Not by the Forest Service. Not by anyone who would have known what was in the cabinet. He didn't want them to take the money. He didn't want them to take any of it. The cabinet, the maps, the Bible. He didn't want any of it to belong to anyone who hadn't earned it. How did you find him? I always knew where he was. Briar looked up. What? He never lied to me, sweetheart. He just didn't want anyone else to know. I would go visit him. 3 or 4 times a year. We would sit on his porch and drink coffee and not say much. He had stopped being talkative after Cecily. He never started again. Did he ever marry? No. Did he have children? No. Did he? Briar stopped. She didn't know how to ask the next question. Imogen waited. After a moment, Briar said, "Did he ever come back to the cabin?" No. Not even once. Not even once. He said he couldn't. He said it would break his heart all over again. He said he had already left it once and once was enough. But he could have come back. He could have lived in it again. After he retired. He could have. Sweetheart. He could have. Imogen reached across the small distance between them. She put her hand on Briar's knee. He didn't want it for himself anymore. He wanted it for whoever came next. And he was afraid that if he came back, he would change his mind. He would stay, and he would close the door to the rest of the world, the way he had wanted to, all those years before. And then when he died, the cabinet would have gone to the Forest Service. And the money, and the maps, and the Bible, and his note, all of it would have gone to a government office somewhere, to be filed, or thrown away, or sold at auction. So he stayed away. He stayed away. For 32 years. For 32 years. Briar started crying, quietly. That's not fair. It wasn't fair. He gave up his whole life. He gave up part of his life. For me. For whoever came. Yes. For me, Imogene. It turned out to be me. It turned out to be you. The fire popped. A small fountain of sparks went up the chimney. The wind outside moved against the cabin walls. The cabin held. Imogene reached into the inside pocket of her canvas jacket. She took out a folded envelope. The envelope was old. The paper was soft. The handwriting on the front was shaky. She slid the envelope across the floor toward Briar. He wrote this on his last day, sweetheart. The hospital in Salmon. October 2003. He knew he was dying. He had 2 days. He asked me for paper. I brought him paper. He wrote this. He gave it to me. He said, whoever comes, give it to her, or him, whichever it turns out to be. Briar took the envelope. Her hands were shaking. Across the front, in Alistair Caldwell's handwriting, shakier now than in the journal, slower, but still his. It said, to whoever finds the cabin. Briar opened the envelope. She unfolded the letter. She read, I do not know your name. I have been trying to imagine you for most of my life. I have failed. I never could see your face. I never could hear your voice. But I have always known that you were coming, or that someone was. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 50, maybe in 500. Maybe the cabin would burn down before you came. Maybe a flood, maybe the trees would grow up through the foundation and the porch would rot and the roof would fall in and nobody would ever know that any of us had been there at all. But here you are. You found the letter from 1971. You found the maps. You found the money. You found the Bible. You found my mother's handwriting on the inside cover. You found my list of names. You probably found the journal behind the bookshelf. I'm sorry. I should have hidden it better. Or maybe I shouldn't have hidden it at all. So now you know. You know about Cecily. You know about the wedding ring on the chain around my neck. You know about the 11 miles in the blizzard for Joseph Aldridge. You know about the homestead and the wildflowers and the difficult labor in the back of the stalled truck. You know about all of it. I want to tell you something now, while I am still here to tell it. I did not survive Cecily. That is the truth. I want to say it once, without softening it. Because you deserve the truth. I did not survive her. Some part of me died in 1957 on a county road outside Caldwell, Idaho, and I have been carrying the rest of myself around for a long time, like a man carrying a coat without anyone inside it. But listen, I want to tell you the other truth too. The cabin saved me. The mountains saved me. Not in the way that people say, not in some cheap inspirational way. They did not give me back what I had lost. Nothing can do that. They did not make me a whole man again. I was never a whole man again. They gave me something else. They gave me a job. They gave me a small, useful job. To take care of a piece of country, to keep the trails clear, to watch for fire, to help the people who got lost, to bring antibiotics through a blizzard, if that was what the day required. They gave me a reason to put on my boots. That is all you really need in the end. A reason to put on your boots. I do not know what loss has brought you to my doorstep. I am sorry that you have known loss, but I want you to know that the cabin will give you the same gift it gave me. It will give you a small, useful job. Take care of the trails. Watch for fire. Help the people who pass through. Be kind to the woman who runs the diner in Stanley. Her father was Joseph Aldridge. She was a little girl when I met her. She is probably an old woman now. She will know me when she hears my name. Be good to her. The money is yours. Spend it on the cabin. Spend it on yourself. Spend it on something that matters to you. I trusted the mountains to send me someone who would know what mattered. The mountains have not failed me yet. I am dying now. I am 72 years old. I have lived a longer life than I expected to live after Cecily. I have lived it badly in some ways, and well in others. I am at peace with most of it. I will be buried in Salmon, Idaho, under a different name than the one I used at the cabin. You will not be able to visit my grave. That is on purpose. The cabin is my grave. The mountains are my grave if you want to remember me. Walk to the spring. Behind the turtle rock, put your hand on the boulder. The granite warms up in the sun. That is where I am. You are not alone, whoever you are. You were never alone. Somebody loved this place before you. Somebody wanted you to have it. Take care of it. And when it is your time, leave something for whoever comes next. That is how it works. Love is the only thing we get to pass on. Alistair Caldwell, October 2003. Briar lowered the letter. She put both hands over her face. She cried, for a long time, without making any sound at all. Imogene did not move from her chair. Imogene did not say anything. Imogene just sat, the way her cousin had taught her, a long time ago. Sometimes you do not interrupt a person who is being remade. You just sit. You just sit with them. When Briar finally lowered her hands, the fire had burned low. Imogene got up, slowly. Her knees clicked. She put another log on. She poked the embers. The van caught. The cabin filled with new light. She sat back down. She said, "He was right about one thing." "What?" "You needed to know." "Yes." "He was right about another thing." "What?" "The mountains do not fail." Briar looked up. Her eyes were red. Her cheeks were wet. Her hair was a mess. She had never looked more beautiful to Imogene Lockhart in her life. "What do I do, Imogen?" "You decide." "What do I decide?" "Everything, sweetheart. The rest of your life. You decide." The storm broke. The snow stopped. The world outside the cabin became very still and very white and very bright. Imogene stayed for 3 more weeks. She did not try to teach Briar anything. She just lived alongside her. Briar watched. Briar learned. Imogene made bread in the cook stove. She did not measure anything. She used her hands. She felt the dough. She knew when it was ready. She showed Briar once, then twice, the 3rd time. Briar made the bread herself. Imogene sewed a tear in Briar's wool sweater, by hand, with small, careful stitches. She did not use a thimble. She had not used a thimble in 50 years. Briar tried. Briar pricked her finger. Imogene did not laugh. Imogene just handed her a piece of cloth. Imogene read the weather. She would stand on the porch in the morning and look at the sky and the ridge and the way the trees were moving, and she would say, "Snow tonight," or "Clear for 3 days," or "Watch the ravens. They know before we do." Briar started writing things down. In a small notebook, she wrote down the things Imogene said. She wrote down the things she did. She wrote down the things she felt. She had never been a writer before, but the cabin wanted one. The cabin had always wanted one. Alistair had been one. In his way. In his letters, in his journal, in his lists. And now Briar would be one too. Wendell came back twice during those 3 weeks, with more wood, with more food, with a small bag of mail from Stanley. Inside the mail, 3 letters from Cordelia Banks. She had been writing every week. She did not know if the letters were getting through. She had been writing anyway. Briar read the letters by the fire that night, after Imogene had gone to sleep. The 3rd letter was the longest. It ended with a question. "Briar, when the spring comes, would you have me for a visit up at your cabin? I am 69 years old. I have not done a real hike in 20 years, but I would like to come, if you would like to have me." Briar wrote back the next morning. Cordelia. Yes, 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 yes. The first thing the spring brought was Imogene leaving. She had said all winter that she would go back to her own cabin once the trail melted out. She did not want to overstay. She did not want Briar to start needing her in the wrong way. "You need to be alone here for a while too, sweetheart. That's part of it. I'll miss you. You'll see me twice a month. Wendell will bring me up. We'll have tea on the porch. I'll go home before sundown. That's how this works now." "Okay. Don't sulk." "I'm not sulking." "Yes, you are. A little." Imogene laughed. It was the first time Briar had heard her really laugh. "You'll be fine, Briar Ashcroft. You're more fine than you know." The second thing the spring brought was Phyllis Aldridge. Briar had not expected her. She came up the trail one Saturday morning in early June, with Wendell driving the ATV on the forest road up to the foot of the pass, and then walking the last 6 miles, on her own 2 feet, at 68 years old. She had a backpack on, a small one, not too heavy. She had a paper grocery bag in her hands. Inside the bag, a pie. Briar saw her come into the clearing. Briar ran down off the porch. Phyllis set the pie down on the porch table before she let Briar hug her, because the pie was important, and because the pie was for both of them. "Phyllis, honey, you walked up here by yourself. I had Wendell on the road. I walked the trail. Phyllis, you're 68 years old. I'm aware. You shouldn't have." "I should have. I should have done it 40 years ago. I should have walked up here when I was 30. I should have come thank him myself. I waited too long. I'm not waiting anymore." Briar didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just hugged her, and Phyllis hugged her back. The pie was apple. It was the best pie Briar had ever eaten. The third thing the spring brought was the work party. Imogene had organized it. Imogene had said, "The roof, the chimney, the lookout tower windows, the west window that sticks, the porch boards in the southeast corner, the chinking in the north wall." Imogene had said, "We can't do this with just you and me and Wendell. We need a crew." Imogene had made a list. The list was Phyllis Aldridge, Reverend Beauchamp, Marguerite Holloway from the county office, Wendell, and two of Wendell's grown nephews, big, strong young men in their 20s, from Salmon. The plan was, the ATVs would come up the forest road in early July, when the snow on the road was finally gone. They would haul everything up to the foot of the pass. From there, Wendell and the nephews would carry the materials all over the pass. The older ones would come up on horseback. There was a small mountain pack outfit out of Stanley that would rent the mules for the hardware. Briar listened to this plan and her eyes got wet. She said, "Imogene, this is a lot of people for me." "It is. They don't have to do this. They want to. But, sweetheart." Imogene stopped her. She put her hands on Briar's shoulders. She looked at her straight on. "Listen to me. Once. And then we will never have this conversation again. Okay. Alistair Caldwell helped Joseph Aldridge in 1964. He helped Mrs. Beauchamp in 1965. He helped a woman through a labor in 1967. He helped the Holloway children in 1969. He helped over 100 people in this valley in 13 years. He never asked for anything. He never accepted anything. He just helped. I know. He has been gone 23 years. He has been off this mountain for more than 50 years. I know. And every single one of those people, or their children, or their grandchildren, have been waiting for an opportunity for more than half a century to do something for him, to say thank you, to pay back even one small piece of what he gave. Oh, and you walked into Phyllis's diner one day with his Bible and asked her about his name. Oh, and the valley had been waiting for you. Sweetheart, the whole valley has been waiting for you. Because you are the only door they have to the gratitude they have been carrying around for more than half a century. Briar started crying. She could not stop crying. Imogene held her against her shoulder and said, quietly, into her hair, "You are not their charity, Briar Ashcroft. You are their gift. From him. They have been waiting to receive you. Don't take that away from them." The work party came in July. 8 people, plus 3 pack mules, plus the ATVs at the foot of the pass. They stayed for 4 days. They re-roofed the cabin. They repointed the chimney. They replaced the porch boards. They put new windows in the lookout tower cab. They cleared a downed tree across the spring trail. They split 4 cords of firewood and stacked it under new tarps. They ate dinner together every night at the heavy wooden table that Alistair Caldwell had eaten at alone for 13 years. The table was not big enough for 8 people, so they pulled out a second table that one of Wendell's nephews had carried up in pieces and assembled on the porch. They pushed the 2 tables together, end to end, half inside, half on the porch, through the open door. The food was simple. Beans, cornbread, trout from the creek that Wendell and one of the nephews had caught that afternoon. A salad of greens Imogene had brought up from her own garden. Phyllis Aldridge said grace before the first dinner. She had not said grace at a meal in 40 years. She said, "Heavenly Father, thank you for this food. Thank you for this shelter. Thank you for the man who built it. Thank you for the girl who saved it. Thank you for letting us all be here together. Amen." Everyone said amen. Briar sat at the head of the table, in Alistair's chair. She looked down the length of the 2 tables. 8 faces. People she had not known a year ago. People who now felt like the entire family she had ever had. She thought about her mother. She thought about Rosalind sitting on the kitchen floor next to her with the road atlas open in her lap. She thought about Rosalind saying, "Then we better start packing." She thought, "Mom, Mom, I want you to see this." And then she heard her mother's voice, the way she had heard it in the storm. "I am seeing this baby. I am seeing all of it." Briar smiled. She raised her water glass. "To Alistair Caldwell." 8 glasses rose. "To Alistair Caldwell." The summer that followed was the best summer of Briar's life. She had visitors, she had work, she had a routine. She had Imogene twice a month for tea on the porch. She had Phyllis once a month with a pie. She had Wendell every few weeks with mail and supplies. She had Reverend Beauchamp every 6 weeks. He would come up the trail at his own slow pace, with his Bible in his pack. He would sit with her in the lookout tower and read aloud while she watched for smoke on the far ridges. He never tried to convert her. He just read. She liked his voice. She wrote every day. She wrote in the small notebook Imogene had given her. She wrote on loose paper she had brought up from Stanley. She wrote on the inside of empty cereal boxes when she ran out of paper. She wrote about the cabin. She wrote about Alistair. She wrote about her mother. She wrote about the wind. By the end of August, she had filled 3 notebooks. She did not know what they were for. She just knew that she had to keep writing. In late August, Cordelia Banks arrived. Wendell brought her up the forest road in the ATV. He had picked her up off the bus in Stanley 2 days before. Cordelia was 69 years old. She had 2 suitcases. She wore traveling clothes and good walking shoes. She did the 6 miles to the cabin in 3 days. Slowly, carefully, with Wendell carrying her bags and walking beside her, with Phyllis having sent up fresh sandwiches in a cooler, with Imogene meeting them at the pass. When Briar saw her come into the clearing, when she saw the small white-haired woman from the hostel in Seattle, the woman who had given her a cup of tea on a rainy evening 3 years ago, the woman who had sent her $200 and a 40-year-old map in an envelope, the woman who had written her every month for almost 2 years. When Briar saw her come into the clearing, she ran. She ran across the meadow, through the wildflowers, with her hair flying behind her. She crashed into Cordelia Banks and put her arms around her and lifted her almost off her feet. Cordelia laughed. Cordelia laughed and laughed and laughed. She had not laughed like that in years. "Sweetheart, Cordelia, you did it. I did it. Look at you. Look at this place. Look at you. I want you to see everything. I'm going to see everything." Cordelia stayed for 2 weeks. Briar showed her every inch of the cabin. She showed her the bookshelf with the Bible on the top shelf. She showed her the metal cabinet in the corner. She showed her the journal, the letters, the list of names. Cordelia read everything. She cried over the letter from 2003. She held Briar's hand while she read it. She said, when she finished, "Your mother, honey." Yes, your mother knew. Knew what? She knew when she told you to go. She knew you would find something like this. She didn't know what. She didn't know where. But she knew. How do you know? Because a mother knows. Sweetheart, a mother always knows. Briar cried. Cordelia cried. They cried together on the last night of Cordelia's visit. They climbed the lookout tower at sunset, both of them, slowly. Cordelia's knees were not great. They went 1 rung at a time. When they reached the cab at the top, the light was the color of late copper. Cordelia stood in the small windowed room. She turned a full circle. She looked at 80 miles of wilderness in every direction. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Briar, yes, your mother sees this. I know. You know. I know, Cordelia. I have known since I got here." Cordelia smiled. Good. Briar wrote the article in September. It was the first thing she ever wrote that she sent anywhere. It was about the cabin, about Alistair, about the list of names, about Phyllis at the diner, about the work party, about the woman who walked 9 miles in a blizzard to save her. It was about love that lasts longer than people. It was about the small, useful job that the mountains give you, if you let them. She sent it to a small magazine about wilderness and conservation in the West. She wrote the address on the envelope and put on a stamp at the post office in Stanley. She did not expect anything to happen. A month later, a letter came back. The magazine wanted to publish it. They paid her $400. The magazine came out in November. A week after it came out, the letters started. They came to Phyllis's diner because that was the address Briar had given. The diner was the only address Briar had. The first letter was from a woman in Pennsylvania. She had read the article. Her brother had died in a car accident in 1989. She had never gotten over it. She had read about Alistair. She wanted Briar to know that the article had helped her, somehow. She did not know exactly how, but it had helped her. The second letter was from a man in Tennessee. The third letter was from a woman in Oregon. By Christmas, there were 40 letters. By February, there were 112. Phyllis kept them all in a cardboard box behind the counter. She would hand the box to Briar every time she came down for a supply run. Briar would carry the box up the mountain. She would read every letter. She would write back to every one. It took her hours. It took her days. She did not mind. It was a small, useful job. In the late spring, Briar made her decisions about the money. She kept $10,000 in the savings account for cabin maintenance and her own future supply runs. She set up the rest, with the help of Marguerite Holloway in the county office, and a lawyer in Salmon who Marguerite recommended. She established a small fund. She called it the Rosalind Ashcroft Memorial Fund. She wrote the description herself. The fund existed to help young women between the ages of 18 and 25, who had lost their mothers, who had nowhere to go, who needed time and space to grieve and to learn and to find a place that might want them. The fund would pay for wilderness skills programs. The fund would pay for 1-month stays at small remote cabins that wilderness organizations operated for solitary writers and researchers. The fund would pay for bus tickets and warm jackets and topographic maps. It was a small fund. It would help a few women a year. That was enough. That was a small, useful job, too. The cabin door was always open in the summer. Briar made a sign and nailed it to a tree at the edge of the clearing. The sign said, "If you walked this far, you are welcome here. Coffee on the stove, water at the spring, rest as long as you need. Be on your way when you're ready." In the first summer, she had the sign up. 11 people came through. Some stayed for an hour. Some stayed for the night. One woman, 43 years old, going through a divorce, stayed for 9 days. She did not say much. She slept a lot. She walked to the spring 3 times a day and sat on the turtle rock with her hand on the granite. On the 10th morning she left. She did not say goodbye. She left a note on the porch table. The note said, "Thank you. I am going to live now. I had forgotten how. I remember now. Briar kept the note. She tucked it inside the front cover of the Bible, behind Alistair's mother's inscription. For Alistair from your mother. Don't forget to pray for the one who comes after you. On a clear evening in late August, Briar climbed the lookout tower alone. She brought the Bible with her. She brought a pencil. She brought a small candle. She climbed slowly. She stood in the cab. She looked out. 80 miles of wilderness in every direction. No roads, no buildings, no power lines. Just the world. She opened the Bible. She turned to the inside cover. She looked at the inscription from Alistair's mother. Written in 1928, maybe. Or 1929, faded brown ink. Careful feminine handwriting. For Alistair from your mother. Don't forget to pray for the one who comes after you. She picked up her pencil. She wrote under the inscription, in her own handwriting, for whoever comes after you. Don't forget to pray for the one who comes after them. She signed it. Briar Ashcroft, 2026. She closed the Bible. She climbed back down the tower. She walked into the cabin. She opened the metal cabinet in the corner. The cabinet was different now. The bags of money were gone. Some of the maps had been sold. The portfolio, with the 1971 letter, was still there. The journal was still there. She placed the Bible on the bottom shelf, with Alistair's letters from his mother, with her own 3 notebooks from the previous summer, with a sealed envelope she had prepared inside the envelope. A small amount of money she had set aside. A note in her own handwriting, to whoever comes next. She closed the cabinet. She locked it. She hung the key on the nail above the door. She walked outside. She stood on the porch. The sun was just touching the western ridge. The aspens in the meadow were starting to turn gold. The first dusting of snow had appeared on the highest peaks the night before. The air had the smell of cold coming. Briar Ashcroft was 22 years old now. She had been at the cabin for 17 months. She was not homeless anymore. She had not been homeless for a long time. She was the caretaker of an old ranger station in the mountains of central Idaho. She had a family of women in their 60s and 70s who came up to drink tea with her on her porch. She had a small fund in her mother's name. She had over 200 letters from strangers in a cardboard box behind the diner counter in Stanley. She had everything. She thought about Alistair. She thought about him standing right here, on this porch, looking at this same view, in 1958, 27 years old, with a wedding ring on a chain around his neck, carrying a grief so heavy that he had moved to the end of the world to set it down. She thought about him deciding to stay. She thought about him deciding to start putting on his boots every morning. She thought about him helping Joseph Aldridge, and the Beauchamps, and the Holloways, and the Witzels, and the woman who named her son Caldwell. She thought about him saving up his money for 60 years for a girl he would never meet. She thought, "You were right, Alistair." She thought, "You were right about everything." She thought about her mother. She thought about Rosalind in the yellow kitchen. She thought about Rosalind sitting on the linoleum floor. She thought about Rosalind saying, "Then we better start packing." She thought, "You were right too, Mom." She thought, "You were right about all of it." The wind moved through the lodgepoles, somewhere far away. A raven called. Briar smiled. She walked back into the cabin. She closed the door behind her. She lit a fire in the fireplace. She put a kettle on the stove. She sat down at the heavy wooden table. She picked up her pencil. She opened her notebook, and she started to write. Briar Ashcroft was 21 years old once. She had $10. She had nowhere to go. She had a mother who had taught her to look at maps, and a stranger who had taught her to drink tea, and a wind that whispered to her at the top of a mountain pass. She spent her last $10 on a cabin in the mountains. It was the best $10 ever spent. She found a fortune in cash. She found a Bible from a mother to a son. She found a letter from a dead man who had thought of her before she was born. But the real fortune she found, the fortune that mattered, was a family of women who had been waiting their whole lives to take care of her, the way somebody had once taken care of someone they loved. That is how love works, in the end. It is the only thing we get to pass on. If this story moved you tonight, please subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments, was there a place that has been pulling at you, or a person who showed up when you needed them most? We would love to hear your story. We will see you in the next one.